LinkedIn presents.
This is the long form of Damona Hoffman and I Have a Podcast. Yo, what's going on, everybody? I am Vinnie Potestivo. This is I Have a Podcast, and our guest is none other than the Damona Hoffman. And in this special long form episode of I Have that you are about to listen to, my team and I have taken the best, the funniest, the most honest and impactful sound bites from our interview with Damona and have compiled them into one gigantic, epic, extended play version of I Have a Podcast, which I am extremely proud to present to you.
Well, it started initially, nobody knew what podcasting was. It had been around for a while, but the especially coming from broadcast network and cable television, it was so foreign to most people that I initially started out doing it as an internet radio show. So I went to a studio where, I paid for space and they would broadcast it, stream it on their platform. So I did it live for, I think I did it that way for 6 years, six and a half years, live every week. And then we would take that and distribute it on iTunes, Stitcher, all of the above. And then about 2 years ago, I realized that I have a space in my house that I could build my own studio and really control my own content. I also realized that the level of podcasting was increasing as more money was coming into the game and more bigger name talent was really stepping up the level production quality that was expected from podcasting. I was like, I can't do this live anymore. I have to be able to edit it and really shape it like I did when I was a TV executive. So I built out my studio here and I now do 3 podcasts from my home studio. I do Dates and Mates, which is my flagship show on dating and relationships. I do a business podcast called I Make a Living, which I do for the FreshBooks brand, and that's all about entrepreneurship and how to carve your own path. And then I also freelance for NPR's Life Kit, and that's all done from right here in my garage.
And was that ever part of the plan to be able to do all that? Because we
To
didn't
work from
grow
my
up.
garage?
Yeah, we didn't grow up thinking that this would ever be done from home. I definitely thought I'd be in a studio by craft services in between hair, makeup, and craft services for the rest of my life working in talent. I never thought that this would be a possibility, and I love the virtual piece of it.
I love it. At the same time, I also miss the not virtual piece of it.
Yeah.
And it's been a continual evolution. So no, I never intended to do any of this, to be honest with you, Vinny. Like I never intended to even be on camera, on the mic. When I started as a TV executive, my goal was to create content that other people were in. But because I had that background
Yeah.
and I also developed my brand as a dating and relationship coach, all while I was also producing television, it was a very natural transition. So I never think too much about where am I ultimately going? I think what do I want to do next and what do the next 1 to 2 years look like?
Well, when you think of those next projects, what is it that is in theme? Is it people? Is it energy? Is it purpose? What's the sort of commonality behind those? Because you have a background in casting a bit
I
as well.
do. I
Yes,
do. You pulling all
we
all
know
all the
people, and
background. I
I just love your background and where you're at right now. Because it's one thing to be a storyteller; it's another thing, to be story doers and makers and formatters, and to let the storytellers tell their story. And I love what you've done in the podcast space. And as I stepped into it, you're definitely one of the people that I've looked up to.
When I look to the future, I just really think about what do I want to do next? Like what do I enjoy doing? And I know I enjoy telling people stories and helping people really um get to create the life that they want. So I do that both in love and also in entrepreneurship and in a lot of different areas of your life. And I love talking to people. I love connecting to people, and I also love entertaining people. So I don't always know exactly what it looks like. I still love television, and Vinny, I got a fire in my belly to do another show, I'm telling you.
Like,
In the next 5
yeah, I
years,
love
it's
it.
gonna
I'm excited.
happen.
Yeah.
I don't know where it's going to happen, but somehow it's going to happen. But I really look at the podcast I've always looked at the podcast as my content engine. So everything I do from my blog to my social media to articles that I now write for LA Times and Washington Post. I look at it all as being connected to the podcast, and I pull elements of it and repurpose elements or use them as jumping off points for different content streams. But it all begins with what happens here in my garage in this little box. Sometimes you don't choose your path chooses you.
Ooh.
So when I was working in casting, actually, I was at CBS and working at the network and finding that there were really talented actors that just did not know what to do to get noticed by someone like you or me. And they didn't have the right headshots. They didn't know what to do when they got in the room. They were maybe really well trained, but there's this whole other piece of marketing and presentation that was not being taught to actors. So I started out teaching these marketing classes at night on all those things that I talked about, and I was dating at the time and on dating apps and realized the similarities between a headshot and a profile pic and a first date and an audition. So I ended up applying those techniques that I was teaching actors to my own online dating experience, and I met my husband, and people were like, "Well, how'd you meet him? Wait, online dating, it actually works? Well, it never worked for me." And I would look at their profile and find that there was a mismatch between what they thought that they were saying and what they actually were putting out into the world. So I started initially just as a profile writer, and it was never intended as a career. I just the whole time I was a TV executive. I did that on the side. It was all word of mouth. People were just
Yeah.
like, Damona's doing, go to Damona, get your profile on." And after
Yeah, she'll
I
make you better. It's funny, Damona, it's funny to think of you sitting there looking through all these profiles, and you're just like, if only you would have said XYZ, then it could have, you could have booked this gig. It could have been so easy for you, guy. But like, you just not how you represent your talent, buddy. It's just like, it's so frustrating sometimes when, how off people's interpretations of how their talent is perceived and also projected. So it's awesome
yes.
to hear that you saw that pain point and we're like, let's fix this.
Yeah, and sometimes it's so subtle, Vinny. Like, I mean, you know this. Like, it could just be that you're showing too much skin, and it makes people think like you're never going to get called in for the doctor if they're looking at you and thinking like she'd be better as like girl in a bar, like. And it's
Right.
the same thing with dating. It's just like, well, you got to sort of cast yourself into your love story. Like, what do you want people to see? Of course, we are all multifaceted, multidimensional. No, you can't put people in a box, but at the same time, I look at your profile as you're the curator of the museum of your life. So you don't put all your paintings out there on the floor. You need to curate them and show people the ones that tell the story that you want to tell them at first. And it's always a progression. Like, I would say this to actors too. Get them to think of you for one thing before they'll think of you for everything. So if you just get in the door. Look, if you know you always go in like I have a friend that played the bellhop, seriously, no joke, about a dozen times. I don't know what it was about him that made everybody think that he was a bellhop, but he kept booking bellhops. And then he would go in and do his best work every time. And then he would get hired again and hired again. And eventually he was able to break out of being the bellhop. But like, I don't know, I would rather be paid to be a bellhop than to not be paid or be working at all. And a lot of people fight against that idea of just like, no, 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 don't put me in a box. And believe me, as a person of color and like not just as a person of color, as a person who is Black, Jewish, biracial. Like, I I come from I and I'm from the Midwest where, like, I no one looked like me. No one had my background. No one had my religious experience. It was I've always been a little bit of a fish out of water. And so I understand the pushback of not wanting to be put in a box, but at the same time, you have to know which parts of yourself to shine a light on for the opportunity that's in front of you at the moment.
And has that changed? Because we talk about this initially as like a photo, and I'm like, and then video profiles? I'm like, oh man, you go and change the rules.
I don't know if we're ready for video profiles, to be honest. They're coming. I mean, they've been here. They've been here.
Yeah.
Match tried it, and there's a bunch of dating apps that are like, video dating, chat roulette kind of things. I um I still think it's a little bit it's that process of it's like the drip of getting to know someone over time. And like Dr. Helen Fisher, whose work I follow and adore, she talks about slow love or slow dating and really letting that connection unfold and revealing yourself in increments over time. Like, I feel like now we're in such a rush. That's the biggest change that I've seen since I started coaching like 15-ish years ago is the speed of dating. Like everybody's just like, I want to get to the result. I want to get to the end. And I think it's mostly, I think, driven by the way we communicate now and social media. People want to blame the dating apps, but I don't think the dating apps are the problem. I think it's the technology that has made everything accessible at the blink of an eye that makes us then put that same pressure onto a process that really does take time. You can't know what the outcome of your relationship is going to be. You can't know if they're the one the time that you meet them. You have to see how you interact over time. You have to build trust through a series of interactions, and you just can't shortcut that. I find that a lot of people are not thinking about the audience first. I'm always like, it's never about me. It's not like, well, I want to talk about this. And I come to this place 8 years later, having probably made the wrong choices in times in the past, but it's not about what show I want to make or what I want to talk about. It's about what does the audience need to know? And who do I want to be my audience? Who do I think would benefit from this information, these conversations? Who would get this? And my audience has also evolved over the years, and I continue to listen to them. This is why I have a dialogue. I really have an open dialogue. I have people submit questions for my show. And partially it's because I love doing advice. That's, the column I have in LA Times is an advice column. I love doing that. But I also love hearing what are you thinking about? What are you struggling with? What do you need to know? Because that actually does help steer the content that I'm making.
You talk about knowing your audience, and um, there's two ways I'd like to approach this conversation. One is when do you feel like you truly know when do you know your audience? Like, how do you know your audience? And then the second part is like, can you explain the benefits to why it's important to even project who you want your audience to be? Because like if you could if you could pick an audience, like pick pick the audience you want. And there's part of picking your audience, and there's part of your audience picking you. So can you walk me through a little bit about, because you've had several podcasts and they must be different experiences, right? Different conversations,
Oh
different
yeah. Yeah,
energies.
they're completely different audiences, really. I can talk most about dates and mates because that is 100% my audience that I've built versus I make a living. I took over that podcast in season 2, so there was already an established audience for that show. Plus, it's an established brand. It's a, accounting solution that a lot of entrepreneurs use. So that to me, I was like, I need to speak to the audience that's already there. Dates and Mates really evolved based on the responses I was getting to certain topics. And I've always believed in inclusivity and wanted to create a space that really spoke to a lot of different people's experiences in love. I will say at the beginning, there's all these marketing experts, right? And people who will tell you like this is what you
Yeah.
should do with your business. And people I was like, I want to be really
Well, I'll say
inclusive.
there's answers everywhere if you look for them, right? There's answers everywhere you look.
Right? And you also
So be careful where you look.
I feel like, comparison what do they say? Like, comparison is the enemy of I'm not good with quotes like that. But if you are looking at what other people are doing, you're always going to be like, "I'm not doing enough." So I was like, "This person's making this much money coaching, and this person's podcast is number 1, and, like, what do I need to do?" And I was instructed to really fine-tune my audience, which is a smart thought process, but to really focus it in on, like, "Look, you gotta have women or men." And I've just always been someone who's really gender inclusive and inclusive of different orientations and different, you know, just different lifestyles. And I was like, I don't know, like I don't really want to do that. I don't want to make people have to declare like I am a cisgender, straight woman looking for a man. But that was kind of the direction because that's all that was out there. That was the direction I was pushed into, and then I feel like I developed an audience that wasn't really mine necessarily. So as
Mhm.
I have moved into topics that are a little bit more in alignment with the way that I look in the world at the world, I have a lot of queer listeners. I have bisexual listeners, I have transgender listeners, I have people that choose not to define their orientation or their gender identity at all, and I love that. I love that this can be a safe place where everyone can get love. And and now I work with the OkCupid brand, which I feel like has also been on that path for a long time. They were like the first to add different gender selections on their app. And I love that, like, now it feels like, my audience. Like, I still speak to straight cisgender women, but I like that it doesn't have to be defined by the way that other people told me it has to be defined, and that has opened up the possibility of a new audience of people that also feel the same way that I do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk about landing on an audience that isn't necessarily your your audience, and I'm sort of put into a place where I'm like, I can imagine people feeling like needing to serve their audience and maybe being always off or feeling disconnected, and I can see how people feel like they might not be doing a great job at communicating a message if the audience isn't receiving it. And it's a great awareness to say maybe it's not you or your message, maybe it is the wrong audience, because the wrong audience in front of the right message will give you a bad result.
Yeah, like, I remember I did an episode on politics and dating because at the as Trump was running for office. We didn't know what was gonna happen, but
Yeah.
it was a really charged time. I mean, still, we are more divided politically in relationships than ever before. That has now taken a bigger, like, if we look at the OkCupid data, people are more likely now to date outside of their geographic area than outside of their political area. And that there's never been a time in history where that was more true. It's surpassed gender, it's surpassed religion. It's the most important thing to most people on their list. And I was feeling that, and I felt like my audience needed to know that. And so I did a topic on politics and love, and I got a couple of very nasty responses, and And you can read them on my reviews if you'd like. And people were like, "You shouldn't talk about politics. It has no place in dating. Like, I'm here to listen to dating." And it was like, but you can't extricate that. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. I have to talk about politics. And yes, it's not necessarily like I have this conversation with my producer a lot because I feel like my show is not a political show. It's not there. I'm not there to promote my political agenda or perspective. But again, it's about inclusivity. I am I would be doing my audience a disservice if I didn't at least raise the question and create the platform for the conversation to unfold. So that person probably unsubscribed, but you kind of have to know the difference between what is one person's offhanded comment and experience and serving the larger audience, and it's sort of it's a dance to thread those different points of view.
I love that you said to discern, the volume of this one person's voice, because the people who complain do tend to be the loudest, way more so than happy applause. So it certainly
Exactly.
can feel, like the whole world is coming down on you just because, one person from who had one, bad day and an interesting upbringing that led to an interesting perspective, I'm sure, um,
Yes.
to really change the energy out there completely.
And I'll admit that's been a challenging thing for me to embrace as my brand has gotten bigger and people see me more places. Like, it's amazing also with social media growing at the same time, how much agency people feel to attack not only what you're doing, but also like everything about yourself. Like I did this episode. So I'm the love expert on the Drew Barrymore Show, and I'm just there, Vinny. I am just there to help people. I'm giving them my advice from 15 years of coaching people on dating, predominantly helping people through the use of dating apps. And like I got this one person that was just hella mad, and they were like,
It's
your dating advice is trashy. Dating apps are trashy. Also, your hair sucks and you're probably not a very good mom. I was just like, why? Why do we have to go
You're
there?
probably left-handed. You probably don't even like the color yellow. You probably you probably spell correspondent wrong.
It is so
Ridiculous,
extra.
ridiculous. By the way,
It's
everyone's an expert. Everyone's an expert, huh?
right.
It's
But
so
I'm like,
extra.
I'm also like, I think we really need a cultural shift around this of just like, I mean, and I've observed this not even
Yeah.
just with my own content, but like people are like, oh, I was trying to, bitch about Peloton instructors and everybody on the page like jumped on. I'm just like, why do you need to bitch about Peloton instructors? Can you just accept that they're doing their best? They're doing their best and trying to help you. And can that be it? But, it's just it's a
You know,
touchy time.
I was gonna say they need to be taught creative feedback, creative criticism. That's a beautiful painting, and I love those colors. And a different palette to do that in might be these over here, or that's a wonderful direction. And there's a wonderful. One of my favorite clients, Peter Thomas Roth, he says this to me, Vinny. That's a great idea. Another way to do it is since we're throwing in expert opinion here, another way to go ahead and do it.
Coming from the background in traditional media where we did have to do that,
Yeah.
we learned that skill set, but a lot of people have that eye now or that ear and haven't gotten the rest of the education. And so I just like to like it's kind of like the do no harm philosophy. And I really
Yeah.
do listen to my listeners. Like if you really have listened to my show and something I've said, like there was an episode where I misgendered somebody, and more than a couple of my listeners realized it and wrote to me. I'm not offended by that. I went back and I rewrote,
Yeah.
recorded the episode. I I I did an apology on Instagram, and I really aimed to fix my mistake. At the same time, if people just are like,
How cool that they
I'd
knew they could
really
reach out to you.
right, right, because I really am listening to my audience. And if they are like, I really need inform this is why I like creating the dialogue and having people submit their questions, because then I really know what they need to know. They're like, "Have you done an episode on interracial dating? Have you done an episode on this?" And I can say, "Yes, I have." I mean, there's pretty much no topic in 8 years that I have not covered. So I'm like, "Yes, I've done that." But I forget because I've been doing it so long. Like, to me, 2 years ago, it feels like yesterday, but I'm like, "Oh yeah, that was 2 years ago." And I have to sometimes go back through my library and pull clips, or I'll say, "You know what? I've realized I haven't talked about this in a while." I use my producing experience in television as well as in coaching clients, and it's a very specific skill set, I feel like, to do this on camera, because I have to be 100% present. And I really feel like podcasting and doing my show live really helped me be able to do that for TV, where I can stay right there with my client and I can really feel the moment too. And I can feel like, for TV, like, we wanna see the emotions. So I know, like, I can fill this space and I can talk through it, like, if I were in a conversation with a friend and didn't want them to get too down, or I can let the moment land and I can wait and I can ask one clarifying question that then brings the wash of emotions out of them. And that, that's all. I'm always wearing multiple hats. So that's kind of the
Yeah.
the tricky thing for me is that I'm always wearing my producer hat, I'm always wearing my coaching hat, and I'm always wearing my hosting hat at the same time. And that's why I also feel like I know there's more TV in me to be done, but in the meantime, I
Yeah.
love getting to explore that on the podcast because it's a little bit, like, lower stakes space to sort of play and see what I can learn and what I can share with the audience.
No, I love that. You talk about, just being able to be really present to do your craft, especially if you're doing it on camera. It's so important to be able to just be focused on your craft and not be thinking about, is my agent getting me my next gig? Is the merch coming out? Is my website, like all of that? Is my next gig? Am I doing it right? Am I doing it right? Are they going to ask me back? Like all of that noise that accompanies, those opportunities to be able to like sort of laser in and focus and be present with those clients. Because if you're not, and we pick up on it. We're the HD cameras and our impeccable eyes, man, like our ears, we hear and see everything now that used to, fly by us. We got to work on a project over at FYI together in television. You've talked about, getting to be on the Drew Barrymore Show. What's your advice for people who have a podcast, who are looking to elevate and expand into larger media properties and looking for more coverage and looking to sort of grow their brand?
Right. Well, it begins with the work that you're already doing. A lot of people are like, they see me on Drew Barrymore Show or they see me on FYI and they're like, "I wanna do that." They're just like,
Yeah.
fast forward. But one, I laid the foundation for that in all the years that I was a producer on television, and I also have really built my on-camera brand incrementally. So I started out, one, I was doing the podcast, so I had content that I was already creating for myself, so I had the experience. Like, whether you're doing this in your garage, I know it sounds really glamorous,
Yeah.
but, if you're doing this in your garage, you have a practicing ground where you can hone your skill to be able to take it anywhere that you want it to go. And so I was doing that, but at the same time, I was pitching for news stories, and just to be able, like, if you can do a local news segment and you get 4 minutes to get 5 talking points out, then you can do a television show more than likely. And you have to build in a place where the stakes aren't so high. So initially, I was spending my own time and money. I would drive out to Palm Springs, 2 hours from where I am, but a smaller market, and they'd say, "I have the 5 AM segment," and I'd say, "I'll take it." Like, put myself up in a hotel, use my hotel points, and just make it happen. I'd drive to San Diego, and after doing that so many times, then I had a reel to be able to pitch myself for bigger opportunities and bigger opportunities. Also, Vinny, I have used my podcast as an opportunity to build relationships with the people that I would like to know. So I didn't get this LA Times column just by like pitching myself and submitting, open queries. I was like, I love the LA Times. It's my home paper. Wouldn't it be cool if I had one of the editors on my show to talk about, they have a column where people like tell their romance stories. And I was like, I'll have her on. She can talk about her stories. And then if there's an opportunity for us to collaborate, then we can. And
And the
I'm
seed's been
always
planted.
playing the long game. I'm always playing the long game. I'm always building relationships for the long term. I'm never like, what can I get? What can I get from you? Like I'm sure you dealt with a lot of talent that is just like Vinny, you are the chair. You are the chair that will get me into the network, right? And that's just never been my philosophy from the time I was an assistant at CBS to the time I was an executive. And I still have people that have given me opportunities now that I worked with when I was an assistant. So I just always look at building the relationship, and from that episode, I was able to foster a relationship and ultimately turn it into a column. And
Yeah.
so I never know where it's headed, but if you're staying present and if you're really focusing on connecting to a person and maintaining the relationship, you can build from wherever you are.
And so you're using that for sort of direction, and then you're nurturing these ideas in a really steady, incremental ways, so that it's really sort of growing into its own strength, as opposed to maybe a preconceived notion of what you wanted it to be versus like what you're hearing from feedback, and as the words and leave your mouth and hit your ears, and you're like, oh, you know what? Maybe I quite didn't think what I thought there.
And it's also going back and re-listening to the interviews that I've done, like I study myself. I'm like, "Oh, okay. You weren't smiling and on camera that didn't look like you wanted to be there, so you need to
Smart.
smile a little bit more." There's one clip that always makes me giggle where a host completely botched my introduction. Like she had no idea what it was saying, and she's like not paying attention to the commas and I didn't know the camera was on me because I was just like listening to her like botch it, and my face. I don't know if anyone else could read my face, but my face was like, "What the hell is this lady saying?" And it's so obvious to me now, but
Like
like at
Ashton
the
Kutcher, come
time.
out, where are you?
Oh, no.
And I'm getting
But, like,
punked.
my face was so like, I could read my face from a mile away in HD, of course.
That's so
So,
funny.
I learned from
That's
that. I was just like,
hysterical.
"Okay, you have to assume," like, because you never know when they're gonna switch to cameras, right? If you're doing live television. So, you have to assume that the camera is always on you. Assume that the mic is always hot. Like, there are a lot of people that haven't learned
Yeah,
that lesson yet. So,
that's very
that's
true.
where I begin, and then I every time I show up on set, no matter what I'm doing, if it's a 5-minute news segment or it's an episode of television, one, I practice my talking points, like I know exactly what I'm talking about. I never go in there half-assed. There's no small opportunity because you never know who's going to be watching. You never know where that clip might end up. And my goal is always like do a great job so they will ask you back. I never go into any opportunity thinking I'm going to do this once. And sometimes I've only done it once, but more often than not, I show up, I'm prepared, I'm camera ready, I know my stuff, and I smile. And more often than not, then when I follow up, they're like, "We'd love to have you back again."
Yeah, only one so far. So far. That's all.
Right.
It's
Right,
it's
exactly.
you know it's pretty hard to get asked to do something, to be really honest and to be very transparent. It's even more difficult to get asked back, right? So like as difficult as it is for the initial opportunity, it's even more difficult for producers to be able to say, "Hey, that was great. We'd love to have you back." We've been in the rooms when those conversations happen, so to
Yes.
to to use that opportunity and to know that everyone from the producer to the director that's going to be part of what you're doing is rooting for you, because the easier you make their job, the quicker they'll have you come back.
That's the thing. I always think how, and I always say this to producers too. Maybe this is why I get asked back. I say, my job is to make your job easy. My job is to make you look good. So I make sure that I'm fully prepared and fully present in the thing that I'm working on. I'm not thinking about getting the next gig in the moment that I'm there. I'm thinking about do the best job. And then as soon as that's over, I start thinking about what's the next thing. So I'm also, Vinny, always thinking about what's the next angle. Like that, and this is another thing I probably picked up from even from casting and being a development executive. Like, you might come in the room and pitch your idea, and I'm like, "Oh, well, I like you, and the idea is not so right, but, you seem like a good producer who I'd wanna work with. What else you got?" And if people are like, "Nothing," you're like, "Thank you very much, and it was nice to
Yeah.
meet
Oh
you." Like,
man.
you've gotta always have 3 ideas in your
Yeah.
back pocket. So even if I'm going in for this one segment, I already know in my head what the next 3 segments possibly could be. And you also have to get a really thick skin for no's. I hear no way more often than I hear yes. And that was a really hard transition for me coming from being a network executive. People told me it was going to be hard. And I was like, nah, I got this. I got this. I have a thick skin. And when you're in the network executive chair and you're the one that's saying yes or no, and then you go to pitching ideas and pitching yourself, and it's no, 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 no. You really have to develop that ability to persevere and know that your worth is not tied to the yes or the no.
Absolutely. Even then, by the way, saying no as an as a casting director, unfortunately, I actually really don't say no. I would just say it wasn't the right opportunity. But if we're talking about decisions, unfortunately, in casting, I say no even probably more than the network does, because of the amount of people that we meet in the siphoning that we're doing. And even that is traumatic, to be really honest, to be blunt and honest about the casting experience as an executive on this side. It's not fun saying no. It's not fun not finding what people want you to find. It's not fun when it doesn't work out the way you want it to. It's not fun. It's especially not fun when the person is the right person, but they just don't have everything together yet. And you're like,
Mm,
oh, you're going to give me, do I got some time? Can I fix your Wikipedia? Can I get you a podcast? Can you need a book? What do I got to?
yes.
It's like that
Yes,
piece.
yes. I've seen that too. And I've also seen for particularly for actors, I would often hear this mentality that casting directors were just all so mean and they just like they hate actors. And I'm like, we have to really reframe our thinking about that. Like, I think the gatekeepers get villainized a lot because you like hold people's destiny in the palm of your hand,
Yeah.
right? But I would always remind them, like, their job is to find the right person for this role, and they want nothing more than for you to be great. They want nothing more than for you to be the solution to the problem that they have. And maybe they've seen 70 people already today, and they're a little bit tired, and they can't like, this is the thing you've been looking forward to all week. This is like, they know in 2 minutes if you are the one or not, and it's not you can't take it personally. And I know this from being now
Yeah.
on both sides. It's so hard to do it, but if you kind of see the best in people and not look at it like they're creating the wall for you, they're creating the opportunity when it's the right time, then you can see the path forward instead of the obstacle.
Yeah, I love that. When you're focused on the opportunity instead of the obstacles, for sure. In fact, to be honest, at the end of a casting day, I'm thinking about seeing 70 people. The thing, I'm actually, my cheeks hurt because of smiling all day long. Like, that super, I'm giving you every inch of teeth whitening power I've possibly got, like it's my Care Bear stare. I'm projecting so much energy in those castings too. So yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's casting's responsibility just to set the room and the tone, the room tone, to make sure that, everyone really can be at their best. But to step into the room knowing that the casting is the one person in the industry who's like literally paid to make you look great and to find you. Like it's not the producer, the agent, the manager, the director, wardrobe. It's none of those people. Now they can do it, but they're just not hired to do it, and that's where casting really stands out.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. Well, I love that this like special skill of yours, like connecting with people and like listening to your story and listening to theirs and putting it together. I love that it's created this interesting world around you. And finally in 2021, everyone's like, oh, what you do, it makes total sense. But like you've been doing this for 10 years, and for 10 years you're like, does anyone know what does anyone understand?
Completely. Like, I would never get a mention for my podcast on air when I would do a segment, they'd be like you said, "Do you have a book? Do you have, like what are your credentials? Are you on a list?"
You got a
And
Twitter account, something?
something. And, like, about, I would say 2.5 years ago, they started embracing, like, I'm talking days, mainstream media, like, saying, "Damona Hoffman, host of the Dates and Mates podcast." Now it's actually like a notch on my belt, as opposed to like, "Oh, we're not gonna say that." But the big thing that I often tell people, I've spoken on how to, like, build your brand and get publicity, because I really gotten Dates and Mates to where it is pretty much on my own. I have a podcast publicist now who helps me book interviews on guest interviews on shows. But for a long time, it was just me hoofing it. And
Yeah, it's hard.
the thing that I think a lot of people don't realize when they are doing promo interviews is, like, it's your job to promote your stuff. It's not the host's job. Like, so many times I would hear from people like, "Oh, I went on and then, like, they didn't ask me anything about this, and I never got to say that I have a podcast or a book or whatever." And I'm like, "That's your fault." It's not up to them to steer the conversation to the thing you wanna talk about. It's up to you, and this is a hard skill to develop, but it's really important to, like, see how to weave your story and the thing that you are promoting into the conversation that you're having on your own without having to be prompted by the host.
Well, as you said earlier, just many, many hats, many, opportunities, and going in and knowing what you want out of it is why it's even more important, because people will take you along for the ride and they'll take you on their journey and they'll want to jump on yours. But like, when we see these actors sitting down at junkets and we hear them repeating the same thing over and over again, and we flip the channels and we say, why do they say the same thing over and over again? Because if they would have said like what oatmeal they were eating, that's what the news would have covered. They would have not have covered the point of the entire press junket, which is, watch the movie.
Yeah, what is it about? Because too many people are, like,
Dates
starting
and
podcasts
mates.
that are just like, I'm interesting, and my friend is funny, and we're just gonna talk about stuff." That's not a podcast. That is that is happy hour at your house. What is the angle? What's your point of view? I think there's enough room for everybody at the table, but you gotta know, like, which chair you're sitting in. That's it.
I love it. And for people who have been listening to us talk about dates and mates, when, where, how can they find it in you and all of your awesomeness?
Well, thank you for asking. What a wonderful host to tee up my my promotion. Dates and Mates is a podcast on all of the major podcast platforms. It is not your mama's love advice. So that is the angle. And we talk to everyone from magazine editors to authors to love experts to celebrities about how to find love in the modern world. And then I also do the I Make a Living podcast, which is coming back in late April. And that's for entrepreneurs, freelancers, side hustlers, anyone who's trying to make their own way in business.
I mean, all of us,
That's
everyone,
everybody. Basically, it's for
everyone.
everybody.
I love
And then I'm
that.
on all the socials at my name, at Damona Hoffman.
Well, you're awesome. And thank you so much for carving out time to connect with me on this and just sharing your energy. And I just, I'm in this space, and as I figure out, my footing, I just love figuring out who my neighbors are and what energy is out there. And I do believe in finding love online. I met my man online 10 years ago.
Hey.
And I've used I've been finding people online. I've turned that into a career. So I fully believe in like what you're doing, and I just love the narrative that you've put to it in a really, I don't want to say provocative, but in a pushing way where you show up and you make people think, and I like it.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, it's an honor to know you, and I am really excited to be on this journey with you. So thank you for having me on the show.
Thanks for listening to I Have a Podcast. For more information about today's episode, visit us at ihaveapodcast.com. If you like what you've heard, follow us or subscribe to be notified of our next episode. And we appreciate any kind reviews.